Hello again guys, and welcome back to another Big Al Devlin video here at the House of Devlin. It's another paganism video that we're focusing on. It's been a while really in the making, these videos, and this video is a part of the runic magic series that I have, because even though I've already filmed a video on the first aett, I thought what I'll do, because it's been such a while, is I'll do a summary video on what the first aett is, the runes that are in it, and how they sort of all interact with one another and represent themselves within you as a person. Because of course the first aett essentially represents what we describe as your base self. If you've watched any of my other videos before, you'll understand exactly what it is, but essentially it's your subconsciousness. Because in paganism we believe, of course, that there are three different distinct elements to yourself, rather than two, which is traditionally in most religions, i.e. a soul and a body. To us, we have our base self, which is essentially your body, but we call it your base self or your subconsciousness. You have your consciousness, which is your self. It's you, it's your persona, your personality, your soul, whatever word you want to give it. Okay, and then you have your higher self, which is your connection to the spiritual realms, an impression left by Odin himself when he created us. Okay, now the aetts, the runes themselves, even though it's a modern concept to use the aetts, it's not that modern, it's about 100 years old, but it's sort of fairly modern concept to use. The aetts are a way of sort of categorizing the runes in a particular order, and the runes of the first aett are the first 8 runes. Each aett has 8 runes. Okay, and the first aett, or the first 8 runes, are essentially all concerned with ultimately your base self. And so as I go along, not only will I be describing to you essentially what the rune is, what it means, what it represents to me on an individual level, at least anyway, on a large scale, in regards how it interacts with other runes, and how it sort of, when put all together, is a map to how to learn, how to open your mind, and how to gain spiritual knowledge. That's how I see the runes. The runes are a map. They're a pathway to teach you how to gain spiritual knowledge and to eventually gain oneness. If you can achieve oneness, then ultimately you in theory could pass on to the next macro cycle, the next reality, the next you will survive Ragnarok. If you survive Ragnarok, you could pass on to the next reality, but only if you have achieved oneness. But don't worry, oneness doesn't have to be achieved in your lifetime. It's achieved not only in your lifetime, but also again in the afterlife, in the next worlds, whichever one you go to in the end, whether it be Valhalla, Sesruminir, which is part of Folkvangir, or whether it's with Aegir and Ran under the sea, or whether it's Helheim or just another random afterlife. It doesn't matter. But anyway, guys, this video, as I say, is an introduction into the sort of the true sort of series that I'm going to have on the aetts. As I say, I've described everything that I'm probably going to try and cover in the description of the runes as a whole. Remember, this is how the runes interact as a whole, and I will have a separate series where I describe how the runes are just sort of considered on an individual level, also, and how they can be used in spells, and how I made my rune stones, the ones that I do have made, because I don't have them all made yet. But with that, we might as well start. So the first rune to consider is the very first rune of the first aett, so the very first rune, and that's it. Well, first of all, one point, if you don't know already, what are the runes? The runes are not an alphabet as such. There's like a list of symbols. There's 24 symbols, okay, and they do represent sounds, okay, but and I suppose if you put those sounds together, you may get words, but they were never used as such in that form. You will never find a pagan text with runes essentially making a language. The runes instead represent sacred geometrical shapes that in turn represent the sounds that existed at the very beginning of the universe, that created reality ultimately, and still exists to this day, maintaining the universe in a constant state of creation and destruction and learning. Okay, now that might sound a bit sort of almost sci-fi, but it's actually not when you consider the Big Bang, for example. The Big Bang is very much the accepted theory in science these days, and it fits perfectly with the pagan belief system, that at the very beginning there was this Big Bang, there was this, a lot of noise obviously created by this massive expansion of, universe from essentially nothingness, and that noise was so loud essentially that it can still be heard today. If you get one of the old TV sets, the ones that get static across it, the reason you get static across it is that's microwave radiation from the very beginning of the universe. That is the sound that the Big Bang made, and it's just one way of picking it up is through an old static television. Okay, and it's a shame really we all have LCD screens now because we don't get that. But it was a wonderful thing to look at. Think that you're looking at the very beginning of the universe, or the remnants of the universe. But essentially, as I say, that sound, those sounds, or that sound, which could be broken down into multiple sounds at the beginning of the universe, is represented in the runes. The runes represent 24 sounds that were part of the beginning of the universe, essentially at the Big Bang, and that continue throughout the universe, like with the static television, maintaining the creational and destructive processes that exist within the universe up to and including today. Okay, so the first rune to consider is Fehu. So that's how you pronounce that rune, Fehu. Okay, Fehu essentially represents, in old terms, it would have essentially represented domestic cattle. Okay, but when you read into it more and you use your higher learning centers to sort of learn the secrets of this particular rune, you see that it really represents, first of all, your base autonomic self. As I say, it represents a part of your base personality. It represents desire. Desire is not something that you think of up here as such. You may have plans and aspirations that come from here, but desire, the simple desire to have something, kind of almost comes from the chest, the heart, doesn't it, ultimately? And it is a base feeling, okay? And that's really what Fehu represents within our physical self, the desire to fulfill things. And what it represents essentially on the cosmological or much larger scale also. Basically, Fehu is the seeking out or the desire to fulfill the potential of any situation that lies ahead of you. Okay, but that is not yet realized. On a cosmological scale, fate, okay, fragments what is called oneness at the very beginning of the universe through a prism of separation and relativity, essentially, and it scatters the probabilities that are trapped within that oneness into infinite number of directions and into infinite distances. Okay, and what it does then after that is then Fehu is the desire or the seeking out process behind fate that makes fate want to fulfill probabilities and regain oneness once more and return oneness back to source. Essentially, that's what Fehu is. Okay, now a ruse is here, carved out of hematite, beautiful stone to work with. Okay, now a ruse represents a different type of cattle. It actually represents wild cattle that don't exist anymore, called the uruk, and the uruk were very, 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 very big. Okay, far larger than domestic cattle, and they were very strong, and they represented strength essentially. And this is is essentially the rune of strength. Okay, but there are different types of strength. Yes, there's not just strength of body. You can get strength of mind and strength of soul also, essentially. And so really what a ruse represents on the whole is determination. okay, within our base self. Again, determination is something that isn't really in our head. It's not really part of our personality. It's not part of our thought pathways. It's a determination that kind of rises up. Almost, it feels sometimes like a fire burning, like a phoenix. You know, like when you've been put on your ass, and you know life's having, you know, its way with you, and you're feeling a bit shit, a bit down and stuff. Sometimes you say real gritty determination to just go through it all and complete it. That's where it comes from, isn't it? Okay, and really that's what a ruse represents in our base self, that determination that you can feel. But on a larger scale, again, a ruse represents the raw energy, essentially, that fuels the desire that we've just previously spoken through about in Feihu, or the seeking out process of Feihu, until the end of time itself. So literally, it's the raw energy that fuels Feihu until the end of time itself. Okay, at the beginning of the cosmos, or the universe, if you wish to call it that, the energy itself is completely unrefined. But as the universe ages and progresses, as probabilities are fulfilled, and you know, things happen, such as man is created, or an Earth comes into existence, or Midgard comes into existence, the universe essentially, basically what happens is that this raw, unrefined energy can then be tapped into by people like ourselves. If you're a magical practitioner like myself, I am a magic practitioner. I do have, you know, I'm a Seder folk. I have the blood of Jotun within me that allows me to perform magic, and essentially pagan magic, that is. Essentially, whenever I use magic, the power comes kind of within. But all pagans understand that magic, if you're not pagan, this may take a little while to get your head around, but if you are pagan, you'll grasp it straight away. Magic is life. We all accept that. Magic is the life around us, the energy of life itself. And a ruse, if you think about it in the cycle, the 3 cycles that all pagans are familiar with, that where fate drives time, drives life. Indirectly, if a ruse is fueling fate, giving fate the power to move forwards, then it is the fuel that is pushing fate forwards, which is in turn pushing time forwards, which in time is defining life and the creation destruction process. And so whenever we say that we are tapping into life as magic practitioners, in theory, we are tapping into the raw or unrefined, or maybe even refined now by this point, refined energy of a ruse itself. And we may find it in a sort of more usable form in the Web of Weird, essentially. When people say they're accessing magic through the Web of Weird, essentially they're still accessing the power of a ruse, either directly or indirectly. Okay? But that's what a ruse is. It's essentially the power, the strength, essentially, that forces fate forwards to complete actions. Because it's essentially what the runes are all about. It's about completions of actions, and then after completing actions, watching those actions degrade, and then eventually learning from both creation and destruction, and using that learning process, that observation of the learning, to achieve a higher self and progress towards oneness. That's essentially on the large scale what the runes are about. But we get to that, as I say, watch all 3 videos to understand exactly what I said there. Okay, now Furizas, this is the 3rd rune. Again, I've carved this in the hematite, so it's a nice easy one to find. There we go, that's what Furizas looks like. And it looks like a fawn, because it is the rune of fawns. Okay. It also represents Thor's hammer, okay, traditionally. But essentially what this represents, again in your base self, is willpower. And that's a little bit different to determination. Willpower, how is it different to determination? Determination is a sort of, is the will, is almost like will, but it is the process that makes you go out and get stuff done. But willpower is the stuff that makes you go out and get stuff done despite any resistance and despite any obstacles that gets in your way. Determination can take you so far, but if something unexpected happens, that determination could be lost. It's easy to lose your determination. We've all had determination, being determined in earlier life to become this, for example, to become a doctor or a lawyer and all the rest of it. But those dreams, they go eventually. Determination is not long term as such, and it can be easily destroyed, okay, or transformed. Willpower, on the other hand, if you truly have a willpower to say no to something, it cannot be broken, okay, and it tends to act in transient matters, but nonetheless, willpower still comes from here, but it's the willpower to resist things that would stop you achieving what you want to achieve, or to resist things that would that people are making you try to do that you don't want to be a part of, okay. And really that's what futhark is. It's the willpower, not of yourself, although it could be, but on a large scale, it's the willpower of the universe itself, and it's the willpower that drives the power of Aruz and the desire of Fehu forwards through all resistances and against all odds. And I think that makes a lot of sense. The next rune is Ansu's, speech. Traditionally it means speech or communication. Alright, let me just find this one. Okay, here's Ansu's. Okay, that's what the Ansu's looks like. Okay, right, so when we consider Ansu's, yes, it means speech or communication. Now, to speak or to communicate with someone or something, okay, the first thing you need to do, the first process of speech or communication is thought. You must think about what you're going to say, or you must think about what you're going to do in order to communicate. It could be with an animal, for example. But regardless of whether it's speech or communication, the first process of this speech is thought. And thought is the first action of intention. When you think, you have an intention to say something or do something, and so that's where intention comes from. Intention comes directly from thought, and Ansu's representing speech indirectly is a sort of, if you go back enough, indirectly represents essentially intention. Okay, and this is exactly what it is on a cosmological scale. Okay, it is the intention that the universe adds essentially to all the previous runes that we've discussed. Aruz, strength, willpower, all the rest of it. Intention is added to all these previous runes and gives to them, as a result, direction to flow. So fate now has a direction to flow because it has intention behind it. Without intention, you do not have any direction. And by giving intention, not only do you give direction to fate, but you give it a lot more relativity in response to other fate, because fate's not just here, it's all over the place. Fate is, there's lots of threads of fate, okay, but you give it relativity to all the other probabilities that exists out there and that are being fulfilled at the time or have already been fulfilled. So it's important, and Ansu's is very important because it gives direction and relativity to the or comparability ultimately to whatever probability you are trying to fulfill. Okay, the next rune to discuss within the first aett is sometimes pronounced Redo, and it looks like an R, but it's actually pronounced Rezu. Okay, and here we are, easy to find. Okay, Rezu looks like that. Okay, now Rezu is in your base self. Again, if we consider that first before we go on to other things, is purpose. That's exactly what it is. Whereas on Ansu's, I don't think I mentioned what it was on your base self, but it is exactly what I said. It's intention. Okay, when you intend to do something, there is some active thought there. We're starting to get towards the conscious level now, but it's still, you can act impulsively very easily. It's that impulsive intention that really Ansu's is representing. But with Reizu, it represents purpose. And purpose still, again, comes from the base self. We're still getting closer towards the conscious mind. Of course, we're coming towards the end of the first ayat and we're progressing into the second ayat. And you'll notice the runes start to become more towards the other consciousnesses that are represented by the other ayats. But it is still, in my personal appearance, purpose is something that still comes from the very base of ourselves. True purpose. Okay? It's sometimes something we can't explain. Such as the thirst for revenge, for example, can give you purpose for something, but that revenge, it's like an anger, it's down here. You don't think it up here. You might think, oh yes, I want to get revenge, but the feeling of wanting revenge is down here, and that's because it's purpose that's fueling that thirst for revenge. I mean, that's quite a bloodthirsty thing to talk about, but it's the only thing that came to mind. Not that I'm seeking revenge upon anyone, but there we go. So Reizu, as I say, is purpose. Okay, traditionally it's represented by a wagon or by the simple process of movement, and that's important because it gives insight into what it is on a cosmological level. Because Reizu is a transformation of intention, which is what we had obviously from Ansu's, into action. So the transformation of intention into action. So there's no point, if you intend to do something, you're still not achieving. But Reizu transforms that intention to get something done into actually getting it done. It transforms it into action itself by giving it purpose. Okay, and it gives the fulfillment process movement now towards completion. So we've already got direction to the fate or to the probability that is being fulfilled, but now we're also giving it movement, and that direction is further enforced by the movement of this fate and this and essentially moving it towards completion, so that something happens in the right way, in the right order, and in its completion essentially. Or we would see it happen in its completion, but we wouldn't see it without this particular rune, the next rune that we're going to be discussing, which is Canas. Right, Canas looks like that. Okay, might be a little hard to see because the way I've painted it, I'm going to repaint that one. So what I do is I engrave the stone and then I paint inside the engraving. Okay. So Canas, on your base self, really, this represents perseverance. Stubbornness, I suppose, is another word that you could write to that. Okay, I might actually write that in my notes. Stubbornness, I like that. So give me 1 second, guys. So perseverance or stubbornness. Okay. Perseverance or stubbornness. Okay. I'm sure you can all agree that's a base feeling that you get to continue doing something even when the shit hits the fan, or when things get hard. You don't get going, you keep going, you keep there, you keep staying there, and you stay there till you achieve whatever you're there to achieve. And that perseverance to go through it all, it's very similar to Furizas in many ways, but that perseverance is represented by Canas. Now Canas traditionally it means either a torch or fire, but it can also mean an ulcer, and many people actually associate this with an illness, and they think, oh, why, this is a horrible rune, an ulcer, who wants an ulcer? But no, what does an ulcer do? An ulcer is it's more figurative. They don't literally mean ulcer when they say ulcer. It's just like a fire when it's given oxygen and it's given fuel. What does it do? Or a torch, again, when you light it and you add more wrappings around it to give it fuel, what does it do? Or what does light do as it lights the darkness? It grows essentially. It swells, and that's essentially what Knas does. It swells the action of Reizu. Sorry about that. So Knas swells Reizu and its movement by purpose until it fulfills a probability fully and to its maximum effect. Okay, so Knas swells Reizu and makes sure that when a probability is being fulfilled, that it is fulfilled to its maximum potential. It isn't just half done and then kind of left. Okay, it makes sure that it is filled to its absolute completion. Right, the next one is pronounced Gabo, and this is Gabo. You might struggle because it's green on green. I'm going to change this. It's Gabo. Okay. Gabo traditionally is known as the gift, exchange, payment, or a partnership. And I believe that really a gift or partnership is perhaps, a partnership actually is perhaps the best term for Gabo, because really Gabo is simply a merger. Okay, it is a merging of all of the other runes that we've just discussed into one. Okay, the merging of all the previous runes into one to achieve a probability to its completion, and it is essentially God damn it, I can't read my writing. Yes, and so essentially Gabo, because it is the merging of all the previous runes that we've discussed on a large scale, on a cosmological scale, it is the actuation of a probability, and thus the universe literally creating through itself. Okay, it's a process of the universe creating through itself, and this is Gabo. Okay, I should really number these pages, shouldn't I? Just in case. Okay, so 1, 2. Doesn't really matter, I know the order of the runes, but just in case, just for easy reference. And we then go into Wunjo. Well, I'm about to say we're missing a rune, but it's over there. Yeah, we then go into the rune of Wunyo. Okay, Wunyo means joy. It's a pretty simple meaning, to be honest, and it's hard to see, but if I go like that, there you go. That's Wunyo. Okay, and I've got it on a kind of sort of transparent pink, very transparent pink stone, almost like glass, and I've painted it pink or purple, and that to me represents what joy would look like. I do apologise for this. I'm going to turn my phone on silent. Okay, there we go. Right, that's so gone. Okay, so Wunyo means joy. Okay, and again, joy is something that you just feel. Happiness is something that you feel here. Same with sadness. It's very much in the base self, and the sense of joy that one gets through completing an achievement, or achieving to the maximum a probability, fulfilling a probability, and progress it is essentially what Wunyo is. The joy of achieving through using all those runes that I've discussed, all put together to achieve a fulfillment and fulfilling a probability or possibility. It gives you a sense of joy, and you get this joy, one, because it's nice to create. Creation is a joyful experience, but it's also joyful because you are progressing towards oneness. When you create something, you gain an understanding of something a little bit more, and you are progressing towards oneness. You're progressing down the chain of runes, essentially, and you're gaining a proportion of your oneness back. And the universe, if it can experience joy, would experience it just in the same way, as it gains more of its oneness back towards a source, essentially. And that is the first aett. Okay, the first aett, as you can see, considers everything to do with the creational part of the life cycle. Okay, so life cycle, as we know, is creation and destruction, and basically the first aett is completely obsessed with and completely dedicated towards the creational cycle and the effects of the creational cycle, such as joy and achievement and things like this, whereas the second aett begins with the destructive cycle, but shows then destruction leading back into creation, so the recycling of going back into a new creational cycle. And it ends with then some very abstract elements. So even though it begins with essentially your consciousness to some degree, it actually then ends, and I will describe it in the next video, with what I would call the bridge to your higher consciousness. Okay, and I'll explain that because that's my own term, so you will not have heard it before, but it's something that I've learned and sort of seen within the second aett, and something that I want to make you aware of. But for the time being, guys, that's a quick recap or summary, and sort of a no, it's not an idiot's guide because it's still quite in depth, but you know, a sort of basic guide to what the runes mean in the first aett. We've got another 2 to go. See you soon, guys.